At about 1:15 a.m. on Thursday, April 4th, 1912, Titanic had completed her delivery trip, steaming about 570 miles from Belfast, and tying up in the White Star Dock, berth 44, Southampton. Although the press had been carrying articles stating that the ship had been completed when she left Belfast, nothing could have been further from the truth. There was still much to do before Titanic sailed on Wednesday, April 10th, and finishing everything up was going to be a rather close shave. When Titanic arrived in Southampton, the United Kingdom was in the middle of a nationwide coal strike. Coal was the fuel of the day, and the strike, which had begun on February 29th, was really beginning to disrupt daily activities. White Star and the International Mercantile Marine had decided to lay up some of their smaller liners, including Majestic, Oceanic, New York, Philadelphia, St. Louis, and St. Paul, and to transfer their passengers to Titanic for her maiden voyage. Their coal would also be transferred to the new liner, ensuring that she would have plenty of fuel in her bunkers to arrive in New York with an ample supply of fuel on hand. Extra coal left over from Olympics coaling was also used to help fuel Titanic. Berth space was at a premium in Southampton as a result, with some of these small or intermediate liners being tied up to one another instead of each getting its own berth. In preparation for her maiden voyage, coal barges, commonly known as coalies from the R.J.H. Ray Company, were made fast to Titanic's sides, and the coaling process began on Thursday, April 4th. Filling Titanic's starboard bunkers was not difficult, but to fill her port bunkers, the ship was boomed out from the pier so that coal barges could be slid alongside between the ship's side and the pier. In spite of the late night arrival in Southampton, Thomas Andrews was up early Thursday morning, and the week in Southampton would prove extraordinarily busy for him. Shortly after the White Star Line had moved its primary terminus from Liverpool to Southampton in 1907, they had asked Harland & Wolff to set up a local shop in Southampton in order to maintain and service their liners there. This new branch of the Belfast shipbuilder was actually quite extensive, sitting on a 2-acre site. They had a boiler shop, plater shed, joiner's shop, electrical department, and a suite of offices. It is with this local facility that Andrews and the men of the builders delegation would coordinate finishing Titanic in the day she stayed in Southampton. Before the day was out, Andrews wrote home to his wife, "I wired you this morning of our safe arrival after a very satisfactory trip. The weather was good and everyone most pleasant. I think the ship will clean up all right before sailing on Wednesday." Andrews' secretary Thompson Hamilton wrote this account of Andrews' activities at the English port. "Through the various days that the vessel lay at Southampton, Mr. Andrews was never for a moment idle. He generally left his hotel at 8:30 for the offices, where he dealt with his correspondence, then went on board until 6:30, when he would return to the offices to sign letters. During the day I took to the ship any urgent papers, and he always dealt with them no matter what his business. He would himself put in their place such things as racks, tables, chairs, berth ladders, electric fans, saying that except he saw everything right, he could not be satisfied." A few issues had been identified with Titanic. There was some sort of serious issue with the restaurant galley hot press. The pebble dashing on the private promenades was too dark. There was also a plan in place to stain the wicker furniture on one side of the ship green. Andrews was also looking to improve the design of the stateroom hat hooks by reducing the number of screws in each. Meanwhile, not all of the ship's facilities were finished. Some of these would remain incomplete at the sailing time on April 10th. For example, Some second-class areas of the ship were not fully furnished, including the laboratories. It was said that only half of the fixtures in one such area had actually been installed, and some of the fixtures were still sitting in crates during the maiden voyage, according to some passengers. This photo was likely taken very early on Thursday, April 4th. It shows Titanic dressed in flags as a salute to the city of Southampton. The photograph was printed in postcard format before the day was out, and 4th Officer Boxall picked up a copy and wrote a few words to his cousin George Clark. This was taken today, soon after he arrived from Belfast. Notice the funnels and one mast of Majestic laid alongside of us. A number of photos taken during Titanic's stay in Southampton show signs of frenetic activity. Much of the ship's china, glassware, and cutlery had not yet been brought aboard. Photographs taken of the ship while she was in Southampton show crate after crate of these items had been carried up the gangplanks and dumped on the decks. Each crate would need to be brought to their correct service and storage locations and carefully unpacked. Almost as soon as Titanic docked in Southampton, word began to spread within Titanic's officer corps that there was a very real possibility of a change. Olympic's chief officer, Henry Wilde, had not sailed with his ship the previous day. The 39-year-old had been slated to receive his first command, White Star's Cymric, but by the end of March he had learned that because of the coal strike, his first command would be delayed. Despite the delay, he had stayed in port when Olympic sailed, and by Thursday morning, Titanic's senior officers were dealing with the news that Wilde was slated to sail as Titanic's chief officer. Although it had not yet been confirmed by White Star headquarters, Captain Smith certainly had a lot of sway in selecting his officers and senior staff, and he may have been heavily involved in making sure that Wilde was aboard for this trip. Although official word had yet to come back from company headquarters in Liverpool confirming Wilde's appointment, Titanic senior officers took it as an all but done deal. If confirmed, as Wilde slid into the post of chief officer, William Murdoch would be demoted to first officer, and Charles Lightoller would be demoted to serve as second officer. David Blair, then serving as second officer, was to be left behind, leaving the junior officer corps ranks unchanged for the maiden voyage. Second Officer Blair purchased a postcard featuring Titanic on it, writing home on Thursday, April 4th. 4th, Southampton. Arrived on Titanic from Belfast today. I'm afraid I shall have to step out to make room for the chief officer of the Olympic, who is going in command, but so many ships laid up he will have to wait. Hope eventually to get back to the ship. Been home all day and down on board tonight on watch. This is a magnificent ship. I feel very disappointed I am not to make the first voyage. Until confirmation of the change, Titanic's officers maintained their original positions throughout the stay in Southampton. The ship's officers needed to maintain standard in-port watches. During the days of her stay, a senior officer and a junior officer were always paired up. At night, 2 junior officers maintained the watch. Second Officer Blair even stood watch on the evening of April 4th. Wilde, however, was seen aboard Titanic regularly and reportedly assisted in preparations for the sailing throughout the week, as everyone awaited word on whether the temporary reassignment would actually happen. While off-duty, Titanic's officers were free to go ashore. Wilde, a lieutenant in the R.n.r., had been widowed a year and a half earlier and was now supporting 4 children. He had at first been hesitant to accept the posting to Titanic, but his friends had reportedly told him they would be mad to refuse the opportunity. Yet, in his private correspondence with family members, Wilde seemed very enthusiastic about his assignment on the ship and the upcoming voyage. Wilde, who stood 6'1" tall, was a much larger man than the average for the other Titanic officers. Lightoller called him a pretty big, powerful chap, and he was a man that would not argue for very long.
A special thank you to our supporters on Patreon: NikkiChan92, Evan Fleming, Lucas Sidlowski, Bluebird Nut, Mark Gegenheimer, Martin Cahill, Maximilian Metcalf, Rachel Warner Sanchez, and Snow Monkey.